those this system has cast off, those it has treated as less than human, can be the backbone and driving force of a fight not only to end their own oppression, but to finally end all oppression and emancipate all of humanity.
This is the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show. It is July 16th, 2020. My name is Andy Z. I'm the host of the show, and we are back at the garage where we started the RNL show. And we are back in the garage where we began our show in early March. For those, I want to welcome, first of all of our new viewers who've never seen this beautiful garage, and our returning viewers. Some of you have written to us to say, what happened to the garage? What happened to the garage? Well, we originally came into this garage because of the COVID crisis and trying to find a place to record. And then more recently, just schedule and stuff that we've not been able to actually get back out here as things were opening up, but now they're shutting down again here in California. And so we're back in the garage this weekend to film 2 segments of today's show. And you know, like I said, we started in this garage and it was freezing cold in here. Chill, you could hear the rain. And today, if you can see the sweat, it's about probably 100 degrees in this place, no air. But we're really happy to be back. You know, when we started in the garage, we made a little joke that it's like being a garage band with aspirations to and the intentions of playing stadiums, or maybe it's like a hip-hop artist working with his recorders in sampling in his bedroom in the projects. Again, with aspirations to be in stadiums and to be heard all over the world. But we're about making an actual revolution. And we started this show with not knowing that much about how to do it, and we've been learning. But we have aspirations to bring about a whole radically new society. As the show opened up with the words of Bob Avakian from the film Revolution Nothing Less, words that said that we are going to those who this system has cast off because we understand that these are the people who could become the emancipators of humanity. So, welcome once again to episode 17 of the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show, and we'll be going in just a second to our first segment, which will be a discussion between me and Luan about what is going to be in this episode, and we'll let you know then everything that you're going to see today. All right, so I'm here with Luan. How you doing?
I'm all right. And you?
Okay, Luan's co-host for the Revolution Nothing Less show, and we're, as we said, in episode 17. So what we have up for people today?
Yeah, so this episode's going to be an interesting one. We're starting off getting into a case that happened starting in 2017. People on the freeway in LA with a sign that said November 4 it begins, and another one that said Trump, Pence must go. And we're going to be getting into, well, what happened when these people were put on trial. What happened and what was the victory that was recently won. And we're going to be getting into some of the story of that, like what the people on the freeway, why they did it, what was this a part of. And we're also going to have a commentary actually by you. So if you want to say some of what that is, and then I'll say the last piece.
Okay, well, I'm going to introduce people, particularly our newer viewers, but also people who've been around for a while. I'm going to introduce you further into what this revolution is all about that we take our name from. Who is this leader, Bob Avakian, and what has he brought forward? Why are we basing the show on that? And we're going to talk about how and why you need to become a part of this revolution if humanity is ever going to get free. And in this segment, we're going to show you some selections from the film, why we need an actual revolution and how we could really make a revolution.
That's right. And in the last section, we're going to be getting into what's actually happening in Chicago, starting with some history on what actually happened 3 years ago, starting where the revolution went, taking this demand, the fight to actually get the youth who are killing each other right now out of that, and into the revolution. And this started in the beginning because Trump actually was putting a whole lot of focus on demonizing these youth, demonizing what was happening in Chicago, and was threatening to send in the feds. And there was a call and response by the revolution for people to come. So you're going to hear some from Lenny, Wolff, and Noche Diaz in conversation, but this is important even today because there's a lot that's actually happening. This is also becoming another key hotspot in this moment, and we want to get into this now and actually have a continuation when people now are actually continuing like this fight. So.
Yeah, we've just initiated some important stuff. The RevComs have just begun a series of protests. They're going to continue through the summer to take on this thing. It's just an awful thing here that this system gives no future to the youth, no future, no hope of having a decent life under this system, sets them against each other. You get these pigs mucking around in the gangs themselves and setting people against each other. And then you have the police and then this fascist regime coming in to exacerbate that, to intensify it, set people against each other, and use that as an excuse to send even more police and federal police into these communities to further destroy our youth. And this has to stop. But it's a tough situation. You can't say, well, just get out of that, and then what? There has to be a way out of this madness, and that's what the revolution is bringing and trying to solve problems, and it's very controversial, and we're going to be doing it all summer. We're going to have several. I think the intention here, you'll hear from Lenny Wolff, the intention is to do several segments over the course of the summer.
Yeah, and part of what I would say is really different about this is actually coming from a recognition that's actually brought out in a lot of BA's work or Bob Avakian's work, that there actually is a lot of potential for these youth, not just to be where they are, but actually to become leaders of the revolution, to become emancipators of humanity. And that's part of where we're actually coming from and stepping forward and even, going straight up with these youth. And I'm not going to go into all of what that means because you're going to hear some of it. And this is going to be really interesting. We really want to draw this into more of what we're talking about on the show, but then also a part of what you can go and help work on too.
Yeah, that's right. And so then let's go to the first segment after we finish up introducing the show is going to be on the Freeway Nine, who, as you were brought out, were calling for the first major demonstration of Refuse Fascism, an organization whose single demand is the Trump-Pence regime must go. Sunsara and myself both had a role in forming that organization, and we have a very basic and very important moral and political stand. In the name of humanity, we refuse to accept a fascist America, and because what we are facing is fascism, which is a qualitatively much more vicious form of rule of this same vicious system, it requires people to act outside the normal workings of the system. And what we're calling for and what we were calling for back then is for people to take to the streets in nonviolent, sustained, day after day, night after night protests until the demand is met for the Trump-Pence regime to be gone. But the case is one, as you just said, has just recently been won after 2 years of legal battles.
Yeah, and this is, we really wanted to get into this because there's some really important lessons to be learned, especially in this moment where people have no idea how to fight in the courts. They have no idea how to fight this. You think of that whole history of everything that was learned like in the 60s, for example, with lawyers like Kunstler and stuff like that. But, this is the kind of fight that we're actually talking about, taking a political battle into the courts and out into the streets. And this is some of what people did. And you were saying this thing, I do want to draw this in really quick. Part of this battle that happened in the Freeway Nine case was that this was put in the LA Times, but look, there actually was a police informant that was put in to spy on this organization. And you're going to learn more about, what was that and what happened. And through the case of this, through the process of this, there actually was a victory. So how did that happen? That's a question. And, this is going to be really exciting. So that's going to be part of what's in this episode.
Well, I think we should go right to the episode and let the segment and on the Freeway Nine, and let Sunsara Taylor introduce it, and then we'll see where it goes.
Back in 2017, on two separate occasions, protesters walked onto the 101 freeway in downtown LA during morning rush hour traffic. And they actually stopped traffic. They unfurled a huge 50-foot banner that said, "Trump, Pence must go." And they did this in response to a call that had been put out by refusefascism.org, a national movement that Andy, myself, and others helped co-initiate after Trump came to power. And this was part of mobilizing and challenging people to step forward in mass, sustained, nonviolent political protest, starting with hundreds or thousands, growing to tens of thousands and even millions, staying in the streets day after day until the single unifying demand, Trump Pence regime must go, had been achieved. So these protesters did this as part of calling forward that kind of protest, and for being on the freeway, they were arrested. They were charged with 43 misdemeanors and faced up to 3 years in jail. As this went forward, it came out that the LAPD Special Anti-Terrorism Division had actually opened up an investigation into the political activities of refusefascism.org organizers here in Los Angeles, and even sent in a police spy, a confidential informant, into their meetings. After 3 years and 2 trials, eventually these charges were dropped. The case was defeated, and this was a real victory for the people and for the fight against fascism. So we're really happy to have here on the RNL show, the Revolution Nothing Less show, 2 members of what's been called the LA Nine, the defendants in that case, to talk about this whole ordeal and what lessons we should draw from it. They are both members of the Revolution Club and of Refuse Fascism here in Los Angeles. Welcome to the RNL show to Chantelle Hershberger and Michelle Chai.
Hello. Thank you.
Thanks for coming on. So listen, I want you guys to take us back to the fall of 2017. And Michelle, I'd like to start with you to just set the context. What was it that we were facing at the time, and you and others with Refuse Fascism here in this city? Why was this protest planned onto the freeway?
Yeah, so in 2017, it was just the first year of the Trump-Pence regime in power. And we had seen protests in the streets, March for Science, the Women's March, right? The day after Trump was inaugurated, that people took to the streets in a way that we hadn't seen before, right? And Refuse Fascism was right in the middle of all of that, putting the demand the Trump-Pence regime must go now because it's a fascist regime and it poses a catastrophic danger to humanity and all of the planet. And for that, we were calling for, mass sustained nonviolent protests in the streets with this demand, Trump-Pence must go. And, in September of 2017 was the first time that, few people got on the 101 freeway in downtown Los Angeles holding placards that read November 4th it begins, which was a call put out by Refuse Fascism of November 4th, beginning that kind of protest in the street where we can, fight to bring people out in the streets and stay in the streets day after day, night after night with this demand, putting it forward and actually fighting through to grow the movement, right? And people got on the 101 freeway, people got arrested. And after that, people got on in November of 2017, people held a 60-foot banner that read Trump Pence regime must go, and did the same thing on the same freeway, stopped traffic for about 30 minutes or so and stood their ground, and to the point where, the cop that came up and tried to arrest people, threw people to the ground, slashed the banner and tried to stop this, but people stood there, right?
Chantelle, you were one of the people who went onto the freeway. I think it'd be really interesting for myself and I think for our viewers to know what was in your head when you did that.
I was saying this earlier, but it felt like when you're anticipating going on a roller coaster for the first time and you're like going up the hill and you're really nervous and you like can't believe you're doing it. But then as soon as you like stepped foot in front of your first car and realized you're okay and like nothing happens, and then it just like empowered you, and then you had like it, and then all the nervousness went away, and it felt really good to be standing side by side with other people that were taking this stand with me. And because I was the S, the very last one closest to the on-ramp, there was cars that actually were getting by us the whole time, and so people would be throwing water at us, telling us get out of the way, but then there was also like people as they were driving by, clapping, and there was a woman that supported us that actually pulled in front to like be in front of me and was giving me a thumbs up and was saying like she was going to stay there and protect us, you know, because she like was fighting. She believed in what we were doing. You know, you're looking around and Trump's threatening nuclear war. He's calling, you know, immigrants like rapists and drug dealers, and you're like, this is terrible. This is messed up. You know, how can we let this go on? You know, and we have to sound the alarm and tell people to wake up. And this was our way of doing it here in Los Angeles, the busiest freeway at rush hour, you know, calling on people to stop accepting this, stop going along with these horrors, this nightmare. And bringing forward to the call Michelle was talking about that, you know, we need to drive this regime out through mass sustained nonviolent protests.
Chantelle, I want to ask you a little bit about the trial. Because, okay, you get charged and you're arrested for being on the freeway. And you went into court and you did not make the case that you were not on the freeway. You were on the freeway, you were proud of being on the freeway, and yet you still said we're not guilty. And that's counterintuitive. It's not what most people do. I think that took a lot of daring. And you actually not only made that argument, you won that argument in court. I think it'd be very interesting to learn a little bit about how that happened, how you guys came to that position, how that case actually unfolded in the courtroom a little bit.
It was nerve-wracking to be like, yes, I'm going to testify. I'm going to, put my fate or whatever, my future in like the hands of a jury and all that. And instead of just like taking a deal and knowing exactly like where, you know, this was going to go. And I had the certainty to do it that way because, you know, what we did was right. You know, what we did was needed then, and it's needed now more than ever. And we wasn't thinking about like myself, like what was going to happen to me, like in that moment, like when I stopped on the freeway, like, yeah, maybe a car could have run me over like they did with Heather Heyer, you know? And so you weren't thinking about what's going to happen to you yourself, but what's going to happen, you know, in the grand scheme of things, like the whole world situation. And at that moment with deciding to get on the stand, deciding to go through trial, it was because it was important to see this all the way through. Like we started it on the freeway, you know, but it wasn't going to end it's not going to end until we drive out this regime. It's not going to end until Trump and Pence are out of office. And me fighting it in the courts too was just to say that I'm seeing this through all the way to the end. I'm not backing down because the demand is right. The Trump-Pence regime must go. And it's up to me, it's up to everyone, the millions who hate Trump, the millions who want to see him gone, to actually act on that.
Michelle, do you want to add anything to some of what got fought out in the courtroom, what you might have learned from that whole process?
Yeah, I mean, it was a whole fight. I remember, you know, the prosecution fighting to get like these T-shirts banned, the refuse fascism messages banned from around, you know, outside of the courthouse, you know, where we were putting up, you know, posters and talking to people about these cases, that they were trying to get this material banned, that they wanted to keep out of the courtroom the fact that there was a confidential informant sent into our meetings, the fact that, you know, that this organization and the messaging behind it. And it was really hard to do that because the evidence that they're putting forward is these people on the freeway with a big banner that says Trump-Pence regime must go. You know, that's all you kept hearing all the time. And I was actually live streaming their action, and everything I was talking about in that. I was glad they played that video as part of the evidence because the jurors got to hear our argument. This is why people were on the freeway. This was a month after Heather Heyer in Charlottesville was run over by white supremacists that Donald Trump called very fine people. This is why we're in the streets. When Donald Trump is telling people that to run over protesters, to take them out on stretchers, these people are putting something on the line because they recognize the urgency of this. This is what we were fighting to bring into the courtroom, to get the jurors to hear, but not just the jurors, but people all out in society, you know, on the campuses, like having people actually sign statements of support for these people because this was right. And actually this point of like, in the civil rights movement, we saw all these people sitting in lunch counters, sitting in and doing things that were quote unquote illegal, taking beatings, taking arrests, risking their lives for this. And it matters. When you look at that from today and look back, you think, yes, I would have stood with those people, And here we are today, and those jurors that were in that jury box and said those people are heroes and they do not deserve to be prosecuted are on the right side. And that prosecutor that kept fighting and making them sound like criminals, treating them like criminals, treating all of us like if what we had done were criminals. And meanwhile, the biggest criminals are occupying the White House, are putting children in concentration camps, are separating families, are threatening the people of the world. This is why it's so important that we did what we did.
It's clear that the state really came hard after you guys. 43 misdemeanor charges, 3 years in jail, sending in the anti-terrorism division to investigate, sending in a police informant to spy, putting Chantelle on trial not once, but twice, losing both trials, and yet refiling the charges, going after you again. All of this until very recently when this was dropped. They were clearly trying to send a very heavy message, not only to you guys, but to anybody who dare stand up in this way, that if you step out of bounds, if you disrupt normalcy and in protest of this fascist regime, you're going to do time. You're going to pay. And yet they didn't succeed. So I think there are actually, they didn't just not succeed, they were defeated in this attempt. And I think there are really important lessons to draw out of this, and I'd like to have both of you speak a little bit to close out this interview on what are the lessons. And Chantelle, I'd like to start with you, particularly the emphasis of fighting a political trial and what that meant and what people should learn from this.
Well, it's the same reasons we did the freeway action. Is it kind of goes in the same direction as how we did the trial. Is just like we weren't confined to like protest as usual. Like throughout the trial, they're like, why didn't you protest like the Women's March? Why didn't you just hang your banner above the freeway? No, we actually need to make a bold statement. We need to sound the alarm, and call people into the streets that feel the same way we do, saying that there's actually another way to go out this, not just that there's another way, this is the way to drive out this regime. This is what's needed. And so we took that freeway and we did the same thing in the courts, is that we didn't just go with how cases are usually fought. We couldn't say no, we didn't step on the freeway, we're not guilty, but yes, we stepped on the freeway. We're not guilty, but no, we didn't leave when the police told us to leave, because this was needed. This was First Amendment protected speech. And so we were fighting, a political battle, honestly, in the courtroom. It was a continuation of what we did on the freeway, not just us as individuals, but like on a societal wide level, modeling the people that you don't have to, it's not so simple, and that it's not going to be easy. We're up against not just the fascist regime, but also, a state that wants to, keep things at the status quo, the order, and, going business as usual, and we challenged that on the freeway. We challenged that in the courtroom. We challenged that when we wouldn't be quiet and we kept wearing our t-shirts in the courtroom no matter what they said. We challenged that when we reached out to the LA Times and they did an investigation uncovering, the LAPD spying. We challenged that in every course, every step of the way. And it ended in not just one mistrial, but a second mistrial, because we stuck with it. I testified again. The jury refused to convict, and it went to the point where they tried to put us on trial for a third time. But we didn't back down.
Okay, Michelle, final thoughts on the significance of this case and looking forward?
Yeah, I think what we did was right. That demand still stands. Trump-Pence regime out now. And, this has to go, to what we were calling in 2017, where there is mass sustained nonviolent protests in the streets day after day, night after night, and, where this movement is growing and sustained to the point where this regime is driven out of power, you know? And that's what we in the Revolution Club are taking up, this struggle to drive out the regime as part of making revolution, you know, to get to the point where we can actually emancipate all of humanity, right? We can't get there if there is a fascist regime still in the White House, and this is why we took up this fight and this struggle and had this, you know, important, you know, victory, you know, here with these cases.
Well, I want to thank you both. Look, I think what you guys did and the call put out by refusefascism.org for people from very diverse political perspectives, including the revolutionaries, as well as people who have very different views of the future that they want to see, but don't want a fascist America. What you guys modeled in terms of stepping out of your comfort zone and putting something on the line to stop a regime that imperils humanity is very important. The courage you demonstrated and the lessons you brought into this show, I want to thank you on behalf of myself and the whole RNL team, and also our viewers, I'm sure, appreciate this. So thanks for coming on the Revolution Nothing Less show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is a moment when masses of young people, with the support of many others, are taking to the streets to demonstrate and to demand that they do not want to live in a world where people are murdered by the police for the color of their skin. They do not want to live in a world of such profound injustice. They want a future fit for humanity. A future fit for humanity can only come about through an actual revolution, and revolution is possible. The road to that future has been mapped by the revolutionary leader, Bob Avakian, B.A. Whether or not there is that better future depends on people like you getting into this revolution and getting into B.A. That is what this segment is about, including for how humanity to get free depends on each of you and all of you getting involved. So I'm going to start by telling you a few things about Bob Avakian and the new communism. For decades, he has been working on what it will take to make a truly liberating revolution. B.A. got involved in the 1960s at the University of California in Berkeley, where he took part in the free speech movement and in the anti-Vietnam War movement, which rocked the country in the 1960s and radicalized B.A. and it radicalized millions of other youth. Then, through working with the Black Panther Party in its early days, he became convinced of the need for revolution. Recognizing and committed to the liberation of people all over the world, as well as to overcoming all forms of exploitation and oppression, B.A. became a revolutionary communist. And over the decades since, he has worked to develop a whole new framework for human emancipation, which we call the new communism. What is the new communism? It is most fundamentally a thoroughly scientific way of knowing and changing the world. It is also a movement that we are building for an actual revolution to emancipate humanity. And it concentrates the goal of a world where all forms of oppression and exploitation would finally and at last be overcome. As a method and approach for understanding the world scientifically, which means understanding the world as it actually is, we can understand the nature and the source of the tremendous inequality, the deprivation, and the horrors of the world today. Why, to take just one example, millions of children die unnecessarily of preventable diseases. Why they die of starvation when there's ample resources and technology to feed everybody on the planet. And why millions of other children work in sweatshops from Bangladesh to the Latin America in dangerous, life-stealing sweatshops, as well as to understand what are the root causes of the discrimination and the oppression of people of color here and all around the world because of their race, their nationality, and the discrimination and degradation of people for their gender. Why does the system continue to destroy the earth, the water, and the air we breathe? And the why of all this can be understood with a scientific method and approach. And the why leads you also to see why all these horrors cannot be reformed under this system, and why only an actual revolution can free humanity. Bob Avakian has done more. He has developed a strategy for how we could actually make a revolution in a country like this. How to defeat such a powerful superpower through revolution has bedeviled those who have sought fundamental change for a century and even longer. And he has written a constitution for a new socialist republic in North America that is a breakthrough in how to lead a new society where people would flourish while working to overcome all the inequalities and the ways that people think that reflect the thousands of years where people had to compete and fight with each other just to survive. A hallmark of BA's work, which reflects who he is as a person and a leader, is a deep understanding of the masses of people and their potential to not just be somebody, be a little big shot in this fucked up world, but to become emancipators of humanity. We began today's episode with words from the film from which we take our name, B.A. Speaks, Revolution, Nothing Less. He says, those the system has cast off, those it has treated as less than human can be the backbone and the driving force of a fight to not only end their own oppression, but to finally end all oppression and emancipate all of humanity. And in the next segment of today's show, we're going to get into the work that the RevComs, which is what we call the revolutionary communists, who are part of the revolution clubs, are doing to bring forward those this system has cast off and lead them to become emancipators of humanity. We're going to focus on work that we have begun in Chicago, a city which has become famous or really infamous for the ways that our youth are set against each other and are killing each other so painfully. Often when people meet the revolution, their faces light up with hope. But then this gets tempered by the question of whether or not this is possible, and especially by those who catch the hardest hell under this system, that these youth out here are just too fucked up to make an actual revolution. Well, we RevComs are going to work on that in the only way it can be changed, by working with them and digging hard and digging deep with them why they need to get into this revolution and leave what it is they're into now. And by getting into this revolution is the only way that they and the world can change. Now I want to play a short segment from the film, Why We Need an Actual Revolution and How We Could Really Make Revolution. In what you're going to see, this comes right after Bob Avakian has discussed the 1960s. And he summed up, quote, that the real failure of that time was that there was not yet a revolutionary vanguard with the scientific foundation and method and the orientation, strategy, and program that could give organized expression to the mass revolutionary sentiment and lead a real attempt at actually making a revolution. Then he goes on to say this about our time now.
That is a challenge before us now. And now, particularly because the work that I have done and the leadership I have been providing over the decades since the 1960s, we do have the further development of the scientific method and approach to revolution with the new communism. We have the strategic approach and plan for making this revolution. We have the Constitution for the new socialist republic in North America, a sweeping vision and concrete blueprint for a radically new and emancipating society aiming for the emancipation of humanity as a whole. But let's be straight up. What we do not have yet are masses of people who are won to revolution and driven to work for it, especially youth who are always the driving force of any revolution. And although we have the foundation and scaffolding of revolutionary organization that could be built on and expanded into a vanguard force capable of actually leading the revolution all the way through, we do not yet have the necessary cadre of leadership on all levels and in all parts of the country who have not only the determination, but also the scientific grounding to lead the masses who must be brought forward in making revolution. While some of us who came forward during the 1960s have retained indeed deepened our revolutionary passion and the scientific grounding that sustains it, many others have given up on revolution. And although there are literally tens of millions in this country who hate the injustices and indignities that people suffer under this system, and who can be awakened to the possibility of a radically different and better world, as yet far too few have been brought forward into the ranks of the revolution and developed and trained as revolutionary leaders. This is what all those who cannot stand to live another day under this monstrosity of a system and are filled with passionate intensity to bring this system down and bring a radically different world into being, this is what we all need to be actively working toward. Building up the ranks of the revolution, first in the thousands, and then as things develop toward the decisive point, millions, as an organized force, and learning to become leaders of this revolution who can enable those millions to be in a position to fight all out with a real chance to win when the time comes. This is not a revolution for revenge. The goal is not for exploited and oppressed humanity to have a chance to become exploiters and oppressors themselves. It is a communist revolution whose goal is nothing less than putting an end to all relations of exploitation and oppression, and all the degradation and destruction bound up with this throughout the world. 2, how we can really make revolution. Many people, including many who say they would like to see a radical change in society, insist that revolution is not possible because they are too powerful and people are too messed up. Well, it is true that shaped as they are by this system, the masses of people in any part of society don't know shit and have their heads up their asses when it comes to an understanding of how things really are, why they are the way they are, and what could and should be done about this. But this stands in sharp contradiction to another important truth, that millions of people really do care about one or more, and many care about all of the 5 stops. This is a contradiction that we have to go to work on, to move masses of people in the direction of the revolution that is needed to finally put a stop to those 5 stops and the horrific conditions to which the masses of humanity are constantly subjected.
I want to pause here in the film to tell you what the 5 stops are. B.A. has already discussed these earlier in the first part of the film. The 5 stops are 5 horrific forms of oppression that this system can't reform away. They are: stop the genocidal persecution, mass incarceration, police brutality, and murder of Black and brown people. Stop the patriarchal degradation, dehumanization, and subjugation of all women everywhere and all oppression based on gender or sexual orientation. Stop the wars of empire, armies of occupation, and crimes against humanity. Stop the demonization, criminalization, and deportations of immigrants and the militarization of the border. Stop capitalism, imperialism from destroying our planet. When you watch the film, you will see that earlier Bob Avakian goes deeply into these 5 stops, which are 5 outrageous problems of this system that people care deeply about that cannot be solved under this system. And here I have to say that this whole film is really a must-watch, including for the section of the film where he goes very deeply into these 5 stops. He breaks them down. He brings the history, how they came to be. He digs into the roots of each of these 5 stops, bringing to light why each of these cannot be reformed under this system of capitalism imperialism. So these 5 stops I just want to add here, because the fact is that many people, millions of people, care about one or more of these stops, indicates 2 things: the basis for an actual revolution and the forces for that revolution. So now let's go back to the film, and we're going to pick this up where Bob Avakian has gone into how everything we do today is preparing for the time when we could actually launch a revolution and actually win a revolution. And that means a real revolution, not making changes within the system. It means overthrowing the system, defeating the forces of repression that exist to defend the system at a time when there is a deep revolutionary crisis which develops, and when it would be possible to launch such a struggle and to actually win. But for that to even be possible, we need you, and together we have work to do to build up the forces for that revolution today. So again, let's go back to the film, why we need an actual revolution and how we could really make a revolution, where BA begins to get into what we need to do now to prepare for that future.
So let's get deeper into what we need to do now. Let's go back to the crucial point that we need to be serious and scientific. A scientific approach and method leads to the understanding that the basis for revolution lies not in what most people are thinking or doing right now or at any given time, but in the deep and defining contradictions of this system. What is concentrated in the 5 stops and all the terrible suffering to which this system subjects millions and billions of people, which cannot be eliminated within this system. But this revolution will not be brought about magically or just by the way this system causes people to suffer. This revolution must be consciously and systematically built for, from here forward, with ever-growing numbers of people, first in the thousands and ultimately in the millions, who are brought forward into the organized ranks of the revolution to actively work for this revolution. How we can win lays out the plan and the means for how we can make this real. First, it is important to understand that although it is true, as I have said in the New Communism, that revolution cannot and will not be made just by spreading the idea of revolution around and perhaps getting some positive responses, thumbs up. At the same time, however, it is also true that spreading the word about this revolution can itself be very important revolutionary work, an important part of building the movement for revolution. The fact is that among those who really need to know about this, including those who most desperately need this revolution, very few have even heard about it. And they are living with the belief that this world as it is the only one that's possible. And for many, this means that on top of being subjected to continual brutality, degradation, and torment, they are suffocated by the lack of hope. Raising people's sights to the possibility of a radically different world can not only bring hope to people on a scientific basis, but can also awaken a potentially powerful force for the revolution that could make this hope a reality. For these reasons, we need to be on a mission to spread the word, to let people know that we have the leadership, the science, the strategy and program, and the basis for organizing people for an actual emancipating revolution. Here again is the importance of the point I emphasized earlier about the great strengths we do have and what is still missing. Masses of people who catch the worst hell under this system and those who were sickened by the endless outrages perpetrated by this system, who need to be brought forward wave after wave and develop into conscious revolutionaries and revolutionary leaders. Spreading the word, particularly as this is done together with others in a planned, systematic way, can be an important step in joining the organized ranks of the revolution and taking part in the process of building the revolution. A crucial next step in making this revolution real is that thousands need to get organized into the ranks of the revolution now, while millions are being influenced in favor of this revolution. Getting organized into the ranks of the revolution means acting together with others in a unified way, as an organized force, guided by the strategic plan and leadership for the revolution, building the revolution among broader masses of people, while also getting deeper into the principles, methods, and goals of this revolution, the basics of which are concentrated in the points of attention for the revolution. A key form of revolutionary organization are the revolution clubs, which live by, propagate, and fight for those points of attention. The core of the revolution clubs are people deeply committed to revolution who closely follow the leadership of the Revolutionary Communist Party, which has the basis in the new communism to provide overall leadership for the revolution. But the revolution clubs also need to reach out to and involve growing numbers of people who are new to the revolution. The revolution clubs are a means through which people can take part in and powerfully represent for the revolution in an organized way as they learn more about the revolution and advance toward joining the party. Networks of people working together to spread the word about and organize people into the revolution need to be built and expanded in all parts of the country and linked together. In areas where the party and the revolution clubs have not yet established an organized presence, or in circumstances where people have not yet come into direct contact with this organized presence of the revolution, but have become aware of the core principles and goals of the revolution, they should reach out to and involve others they can draw forward around those core principles and goals. They should link up with the central leadership of the revolution for assistance and direction in organizing a revolution club among the people they are bringing into the revolution, on the basis of the points of attention for the revolution, which are included in the pamphlet, How We Can Win, and are posted at revcom.us. A crucial connecting link in all this is the party's website, revcom.us, and newspaper, Revolution, which sharply expose the crimes of this system, scientifically analyze why it cannot be reformed, and give guidance and direction for people to work in a unified way for the revolution. In everything we do, it needs to be kept clearly in mind and boldly put forward to people that whatever part of the country we are in, and whatever the size of our forces at any given time, we are doing all this as part of a national movement, together with people in other parts of the country, aiming to impact all of society and building a revolution to overthrow the whole system with the whole world in mind.
Let this be an introduction and an invitation to you to be a part of the most important struggle there could be, to be a part of filling a great need for humanity and even for the planet itself. I'm going to repeat a sentence in what you just heard B.A. say, quote, "Raising people's sights to the possibility of a radically different world can not only bring hope to people on a scientific basis, but can also awaken a potentially powerful force for the revolution that could make this hope a reality." This is a difference that you, those who are watching who have just found the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show can make, that those of you who just met the revolution during the last few weeks of protests can make, as all of you learn more about this revolution, about BA, and the path to revolution he has developed. By making this known, by spreading this everywhere. Look, over the last month and a half with the Black Lives Matter movement sweeping the country, with masses of youth who've gotten a sense that they have power through standing up and defiantly standing together against what the system brings down on the people, people have gained a profound understanding, a profound feeling that perhaps things could be different. They really could change. But for that to really be true, for that hope, for that promise to be real, People need to know that there is a way out of the madness and the horror of this world, and that it's not going to come by re-envisioning the police, who under this system exist only and must necessarily exist to serve and protect the system of exploitation and oppression with white supremacy woven through it. If the police, or police with a new name, were not to do this, then this society that we live under would cease to function. It is liberating to know that there is a leader in Bob Avakian who has brought the way forward out of this craziness and horror. People need to know that there is a strategy for an actual revolution, a strategy that's possible, and that there is a plan for a radically new and better society. They need to know that there are people like myself and the other hosts of this show and the RevComs who are followers of BA, living by and spreading and fighting for the points of attention for the revolution and getting into the science of the new communism. And you need to know too, and we need to let people know far and wide, that for humanity to be free, thousands of people, which includes you, need to become followers of BA too. So I want to come back to where we began. Look, we're in a crucial moment in history, and whether or not people know that there is this show, the RNL show, this leadership, this revolution, has everything to do with the answer to the question that Bob Avakian poses earlier in this film. He says we have two choices: either live with all this and condemn future generations to the same or worse if there is a future, or make revolution. So work with us on the biggest, most important struggle there is, getting free from all the devastation, oppression, and exploitation of this system. Get in touch with the revolution. Connect up with the revolution clubs. The RNL Revolution Nothing Less show is a key way we are working to reach thousands of new people. We really work hard to make this show popular and informative, and to bring the revolution to people, and to work with the ideas of the revolution, and to bring other people onto the show too, from different points of view, who can bring insights into why this revolution is necessary and what it should be for. But we need you to be a part of the show, engaging the content, corresponding with us, spreading it on social media. Look, if tens of thousands of people were watching this show every week, that would make an impact on society, and that would make a very big difference. B.A. said in the segment we just watched, form a network around this show. Now, he didn't say exactly that because the show didn't exist when he gave the speech. But he did say form a network around RevCom.us, our website. He said form networks around the points of attention for the revolution. And I'm sure he would say around this show too today. So this is the show, the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show, which you find on the RevComs channel on YouTube. You can make a comment below if you're watching us on YouTube right now and have the ability to do that. That would be important. You can contact us on social media at the RevComs on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. You can write to the RevComs at gmail.com. We want you to do this. We want to know what you think. We want to be connected with you. Leave a phone number. We can get back in touch with you if you want to form a network or a club. So our message to all of you, to our new viewers, to our returning viewers, and to all of you who've been involved with this and a part of this movement for some time, this is our message today. We need to overthrow this oppressive system and bring about a radically and much better system into being. We are building a movement for this revolution now. We are working to bring forward and organize thousands of people now, people like you, people who are taking up and getting trained in the strategy and the theory of the revolution brought forward by B.A., Bob Avakian. People who are moving together to apply this now, to hasten by impacting, by influencing and developing things towards this revolution, so that we can lead millions to make this revolution at the earliest possible time, as soon as the necessary conditions for that have been brought into being. So with that, let's go.
This summer, violence has again torn open the wounded, bleeding streets of Chicago. Young black people are striking out in tragically misdirected rage and hurt, shooting, maiming, and killing each other, and in the crossfire hitting those who could be their baby brothers or baby sisters or their grandmas, or often just somebody from another block who looks just like them and has had the same life experience but is deemed to be an enemy. Politicians, from the liberal Mayor Lightfoot of Chicago to the bloodthirsty white supremacist fascist Trump, proffer solutions that won't solve anything. None of them can solve a problem built into this system. They can only offer more incarceration and more violent repression from the pigs. In other words, more enforcement of the conditions that perpetuate this horror. Bob Avakian has recently said in his podcast series, Emancipate Humanity with Bob Avakian,
for those, whether outright racists or people who have allowed themselves to take up the thinking of racists, who try to dismiss outrage about police murder of black people by talking about how more black people are killed by other black people than by anyone else, including police. As I have emphasized in a number of talks and writings, this too is caused by this system. It is the system working on people, confining masses of black people in conditions of deprivation, degradation, and hopelessness, and continually pumping at them the dog-eat-dog mentality that fuels this cutthroat system of exploitation and oppression from top to bottom. That black people who were already so viciously oppressed and suffering so terribly are killing each other in such great numbers is something that should make any decent person heartsick, and it should drive them to seek the way to put an end to this by getting to the deeper causes of this and moving to change all that. If those people who are constantly citing statistics about black-on-black crime really wanted to do something meaningful about the fact that black people, and especially the youth, are killing each other in tragically high numbers, they would join with those of us who are working to win these youth to the revolution that can bring down this system, which is the fundamental cause of this, and bring into being a system which would uproot the conditions and transform the ways of thinking that give rise to this.
But how to win these youth to the revolution? Just to be clear, this is not about feeling sorry for them for what they are into, though this situation is indeed hugely painful to any revolutionary. This is about challenging people who must be part of the backbone force for revolution in this country to get out of what they are into and to get into what they need to be into. Revolution, nothing less. So what does that mean concretely? And what are the RevComs doing about this? This past weekend, revolution clubs held bold actions in Chicago and LA, in some of the areas hardest hit by this violence.
For calling for systemic reform. Members of the Revolution Club marched through South Shore delivering their message. They say the root causes of urban violence start with the justice system and police brutality in communities of color. The group says minorities are, quote, being played against each other.
We're out here, challenging the youth, telling them to get out of that shit that they're caught up in. There's a whole better way that the world could be. And this system is playing you. It got you caught up killing each other. It got you in horrific conditions. And on top of that, they send their police force out and murder you. And this shit has been going on for too long. You know, and if you just look at the long history of this country, what it does to oppress people, we say no more to that. And we're actually out here, members of the Revolution Club across this country are actually, you know, trying to address this problem, but especially in Chicago. What is Chicago known for here and around the world? It's known for the youth killing each other and the police murdering them. But Chicago could be known for something else. This could be a beginning force, people stepping into the revolution and dedicating their lives to that. Not without struggle and not how they are now. They're going to have to break and transform themselves, but you can do it.
But what is the understanding and strategy behind this? To get into that and to cover this crucial question in an ongoing way over the course of the rest of the summer, we're going to be talking with Noche Diaz, someone who helped lead the Revolution Club in Chicago over the past few years and who is now based in LA with the national tour to get organized for an actual revolution. I talked with Noche coming into this, and we agreed that the best thing to situate our viewers in a revolutionary and scientific view of the question was to watch a part of Bob Avakian's 2012 speech, Revolution Nothing Less. So we'll do that, and then Noche and I will begin the conversation.
The revolution has a future for the youth. For the masses of youth in this country and throughout the world, this system has no future for them, but the revolution does. A revolution and a future in which these youth can and must have a decisive and increasingly conscious role. People tell us that these youth, especially these youth who are on the bottom being stepped on and beaten down every day, have been reduced to conditions where they could not any longer rise up to play this revolutionary role. But this is not true. People need to think about how hard many of these youth have tried to get out of the conditions they're in and get to some place where they could do something much better. This too gets not only forgotten but consciously covered up. Right now in the California prisons, the people who carried out self-sacrificing hunger strikes have made a call for peace among people of the different races in the prisons. We should understand how tremendously significant and difficult this is. How much is going up against it, both among the masses spontaneously, but also for the workings of the authorities and how much they'll try to undercut and sabotage this. This needs a lot of support. It needs to be popularized. People need to know about it. They need to support people who have been condemned and cast aside as less than human and the worst of the worst when they reach for something lofty like this. But from the perspective of understanding all that I've been talking about, and for those who do understand this, we need to work to make this part of building a movement for revolution. We need to approach everything in that way and from that framework, even while uniting with other people who have not yet been won to that position and are coming from different perspectives. Or think, let's go back again to the LA Rebellion. Sometimes it's forgotten, and we need to not forget how hard so many of the people caught up in a lot of bad shit tried to break out of that at that time. From the first night of the rebellion to some time in its aftermath. There was the graffiti on the wall in LA the first night of the rebellion. Blacks and Mexicans together tonight. Think about what that signified and how significant that was. And then in the aftermath of the rebellion, you had all these attempts at forging unity, overcoming these deep divisions among the people that had grown over years with bitter antagonism. There were unity picnics. There were attempts at unity conferences all around the country. The police would attack the unity picnics. I remember seeing a picture at that time of two young guys one a Blood and one a Crip, shortly after the rebellion, with their arms around each other. Do we understand the significance of that and how much that means? These are youth who from a very early age are taught that they count for nothing and deserve nothing but a boot up their ass and a bullet in their brain, or a long time in jail. And so you have nothing, and you're told to expect nothing. And so you try to get something by carving out a little space on a street in a neighborhood that doesn't belong to you. Doesn't really mean anything, but it's all that you can feel, that you can plant yourself in and find some meaning and purpose in. And then there are other people 2 blocks away, whether you're Mexicans and in your rival gangs, or you're black in your rival gangs, or Vietnamese, or whatever. People 2 blocks away just like you. But if they come in the little territory that you've staked out your hood, the rules are they're slipping, you got to shoot them. You shoot them. So then they have to come back and kill you and your family and your friends. And on it goes, back and forth for years and years. People kept like in cages. And here they took the step, after all these years of this bitter experience of friends and loved ones being killed on both sides, back and forth, and the meaning of their putting their arms around each other and trying to forge something different, but the system wouldn't have it and couldn't have it. They attacked the unity picnics time and again. But more than that, the program that these people, these youth and others who, OGs in the gangs and whatever, tried to come up with was a program for reform, for entrepreneurialism that couldn't work under the system. There was no room for it. And so it didn't go anywhere, and then many went back to the old ways, and youth coming up fell back and, were sort of channeled into those ways. But they tried so hard. And so genuinely heroically. And the problem is that under the system, there's no basis for overcoming these kind of divisions. But in striving for and building a movement for revolution, there is the basis, and this is what we have to be fighting for, to bring forward the full potential of these and other youth and other sections of oppressed people, men and women, to be the backbone and driving force, and win them through a lot of struggle to be that backbone and driving force of this revolution.
So that was Bob Avakian in the 2012 speech, Revolution, Nothing Less. So Noche, you came up in the Bronx, as you reminded me before our interview today. Then you moved to Chicago in 2017. What was behind that move? What were you and the RevComs trying to do there, and what did you learn?
So in 2017, there was actually a call for volunteers that was put out on revcom.us, and I was one of several people from around the country who volunteered to go to Chicago. And reason the call was put out was 2 big reasons. One is what Chicago is known for, and when we talked and we wanted to play this clip from BA to give people a really living sense of what we're talking about, not just in the terms of the damage that's being done to the very people who are caught up in this, but also the fact that these are human beings who are capable of so much more, but right now are caught up in some very bad shit, okay? And so Chicago is known around the world for 2 things: police murdering and brutalizing and terrorizing, especially black people, and for the way in which, the very people targeted this way are caught up in fighting and killing each other right now. But at the same time, at that time when the project was called for in 2017, we saw this escalating situation where where what was going on in Chicago was being taken advantage of by people like Trump and his whole campaign, and then, when he came to power through the election, to single out and target Chicago as a particularly, despicable place that needed to be cleaned up, and to use a lot of this Hitler language to talk about the masses of black people in Chicago as, needing to be, swept off the streets, and the police needed to have the gloves taken off so that they could, quote unquote, do their jobs, and that they would take a week to, get rid of all the criminals and all the crime. And, we understood the genocidal implications, or the accelerating genocidal implications of what was going on. And we, felt the need to go into the midst of that and actually fight to bring something out of that situation, where instead of this horrible situation then being taken advantage of by the people in power to make it even more horrible, was a situation that could become one in where the very people who are caught up in this way, who are demonized so much in this way, are then brought forward into the revolution on the basis of this emancipatory understanding that Bob Avakian has developed, the strategy for revolution in terms of how we could bring down this oppressive system, and the constitution for the new society that we could be part of running, that could put an end to all this long history of divisions amongst people and violent conflicts and destruction. And if a core of people could come out of all of that in Chicago, the way in which now people look at it and have that weight on them that the people who are most oppressed could never rise above and be capable of something greater. They could see an example of people, even if it's a few to begin with, actually stepping into, this emancipating revolution that Bob Avakian is building, and inspire and lift the hopes and aspirations of people all around the country, but also throughout the world.
So what were the RevComs actually aiming to do in Chicago? When I explain this to people, sometimes they say, "Oh, is that stop the violence? Oh, are you trying to get people jobs? How are you trying to reach these youth?"
Yeah, well, look, we weren't just trying to reach them where they were already at. That was actually where we need to get people out of, and we're not going there because we have a whole bunch of financial backers, or we can just give out a lot of, basically bribes for people to get into the revolution. We actually just went out with, we have an understanding of why people are in this mess and how to get out of it, and we went to fight like hell with people to get out of living and dying for, this way of life, of staying in this system, acting in this dog-eat-dog kind of a way, going out the way they want us to, and get into fighting for a revolution to put an end to that whole thing here and throughout the world. And so, what the RevComs were doing throughout a whole course of about 2 years ranged from, going through different neighborhoods that were contending, including places where, to give people a sense, like in Chicago, there's some corners where you can't stand on the diagonal end of the corner without getting, into a fight with someone from another set, and the RevComs went through and crossed those lines and challenged people, to put on these shirts and cross those lines with us, and to represent for these 6 points of attention that we were getting out in these different neighborhoods, and for that to be something that people associated with those who were getting into the revolution. And we had, some of that going in different places. We'd get that going in one neighborhood, and then the police would come and threaten everybody who put on the Revolution Nothing Less shirt with arrest or attack. And some funny things happened even in those areas, that we can't say for sure what happened, but people who were trying to do something better, got messed up in different kinds of ways by the authorities and by other things that were very suspicious. But, this was all the kinds of contention that was going on. People would be standing with us one day against the police, and then the next day they'd realize that could get them into a whole bunch of trouble, and so they'd be turning on us and pulling out knives and whatever like that, and we had to be willing to risk getting shot at and going up against all kinds of religious ways of thinking, and this church trying to drive out the revolution, that church, and we were also getting arrested all the time by the police because we were not letting them mess with people. We were showing people how to stand up and say, no, that doesn't fly here. While those of us who are stepping into the revolution are around, we're going to work together to stand up to this together. And we, got people together at our organizing center to get into basics, to get into, the film Revolution Nothing Less, and to really lift people's sights to a whole other thing. And, this was a whole pretty wild process, and very, for people to understand, this is not, this is south side of Chicago. This was the south side of Chicago. It's not like this is one of the most segregated areas in the country. That has a whole history, which you can read about on RevCom.us, about how this, came about. But, people are just concentrated in these, segregated neighborhoods. People are in situations where, people don't even come outside their homes. One of the things, I'm going on a little bit, but I'm sorry, but, you see even the videos of people marching through Chicago yesterday, and in the areas where people got shot down, and everybody's, if they're coming out to even look at what's going on, they're just peeking out their door, or they're just at their steps, and people are very nervous about stepping, even going onto the street and playing with people, kids playing with other kids down the street is one of the most beautiful things to see. But it's even they kind of have a sense at a very young age that this is something that could get you killed. This is the kinds of areas where we were going, and not just there, but mainly there, and we were introducing people like that into the revolution, but also to the whole world. And we took people down to see the eclipse when it was happening, and other different things like that. But we were really fighting to bring something that wasn't already there, that didn't exist, and that was very disruptive to the whole way people have learned to live under this oppression and take up the way of thinking and acting that goes along with living in a dog-eat-dog capitalist imperialist system.
I think I just want to add the one incident that kind of captured a lot. When the RevComs got one of those big outdoor screens and had a Saturday night film showing of a section of Bob Avakian's film, Revolution, Nothing Less. And it was one of those nights where a lot of the different personages in the neighborhood came out, including the commander of the precinct that was arresting you guys all the time, who got into a big argument with Carl Dix that later got circulated on YouTube, if I remember correctly. It was a very big, within a certain area, it became a very big thing. What I want to do, go.
Yeah, no, that's important. And hopefully, over the course of, the next few weeks on the show, we can get into, that example that does concentrate, even a lot of the different kinds of things that we learned about, what people are run up against, in terms of trying to do something better, trying to get with the revolution, what forces are arrayed against it, what different programs exist even amongst the ruling powers over how to deal with this, because that commander didn't just happen to be the local commander. He was someone being groomed as a model for their whole community policing program that ended up falling apart. So there's a lot that that we learned through the course of that. Hopefully we'll be able to share some more throughout the course of the
Well, I think what we want to do over the next several weeks, or more likely a couple of months, is to get into a little bit more on what was done and what was learned through what was done. I think we're going to want to spend some time on the video clip from Bob Avakian's speech in Chicago, where he actually leads discussion with people about what to do about this burning problem. And we're going to want to talk some about what people are doing now to actually accomplish this mission of bringing forward these youth as an organized force, part of an organized force for an actual revolution in this country, getting into the strategy, getting into the work that's been done by BA, and not being deterred by anyone or anything at all. I think that's really important. We do want to hear from our viewers on this. I especially want to call out to the comrades who are carrying forward this work, in particular in Chicago, but also in Los Angeles. But anybody who has any thinking on how to crack this extremely serious problem and make it into something that can be a tremendous, turn this around, change the character of it, so that this becomes something that turns increasing numbers of people toward revolution and brings forward the organized force I just talked about.
So this is the end of episode 17. We just want to say thank you for watching, and this has been the RNL show, and we just want to let people know that we're actually going to be continuing going back to this question of what's going on in Chicago. So tune in every week to catch up on what's actually happening this summer. And Andy's got some words.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that the previous two episodes, episodes 15 and episode 16, that deal with the whole July 4th fascist rampage from Trump, are very rich episodes. Episode 15 also features an interview with Chuck D from Public Enemy. Episode 16 has just an incredible historical thing on the Trail of Tears, which is a absolute genocide of the native people that was led by Andrew Jackson, whose statue Trump has defended and actually called for the tremendously heavy sentences and fines against people who were attempting to take that down in Washington, D.C. So these are two episodes for you to get into and to spread to your friends. And then I also want to encourage you to spread this episode, but also watch next week. We have something very special planned for next week, and get all your friends to watch episode 18 next week. So you want to close it out?
Yeah, we just want to say good night and see you guys next episode.